I think we need unequivocal proof that this chemical attack was done by Assad's forces, and I'm not at all convinced at the moment we have unequivocal proof. All of the reports are coming from people like the White Helmets, who have a track record of actually doing propaganda for the opposition forces in Syria, and the World Health Organization's reports are coming from doctors who are working in Douma, who are also part of the opposition there. So I think we need to be absolutely clear that unequivocally that the Assad regime did this.
Well, there's quite a lot of circumstantial evidence, isn't there? We know that he's in possession of these weapons. We know that he's used these weapons before. But also, crucially, the fact that the Russians have vetoed a United Nations Security Council attempt to send in, investigators and to actually verify what's happened, and the fact that the Russian forces have gone in very, very, very quick themselves, and it is thought that it's suspected that they're recovering any evidence themselves. It would be very simple, surely, to be able to prove in any direction. But the Russians who are backing the Assad regime are preventing such an investigation taking place. That's quite a lot of circumstantial evidence, isn't it?
Sorry, there is circumstantial, but I don't think that's actually true. The International Chemical Weapons Convention people have been invited in by the Russians and will be there within the next couple of days.
After the Russians have been in.
Yeah, well, so they haven't said that. So I mean, I'm not saying I don't know. I don't know, but I think we do need unequivocal proof. And as a military man, if I'd been advising Assad, I'd have said, you're about to take over that bit of territory. You've almost got the whole of that area now under your control. Why on earth would you do something that would bring the international forces in? If I had been advising the opposition, I'd have said, get a barrel of chlorine gas here. At some stage, there'll be bombs dropped on you. When that happens, blow it up. And we can blame them because what we really want is the Allies coming. Anyway, that aside, if it is proved unequivocally that was the case, I think we do need to be part of a coalition if it's involved in giving him a rap across the knuckles. But let's not kid ourselves. The most important thing in Syria is to stop the civil war, which, as long as it goes on, is killing more and more of the poor, benighted Syrian people. And our attack, although it might rap his knuckles, will not shorten that war. If anything, it'll lengthen that.
And that's been the issue. There has seemed to be, once there was a vacuum when America chose not to act and Obama sort of ignored his red line in the sand and Putin went in, there was a view that, well, at least he would hasten the end of the civil war. And yes, Assad would still be in power, but you'd probably see less loss of life as a result of that. But this is the thing. If we did get involved, other than a rap on the knuckles, other than as a deterrence to other countries, other dictators from using chemical weapons, what purpose would it serve?
I don't think it'll serve any purpose within Syria. And certainly, if it's more than a rap, and let's face it, the last attack, which was that cruise missile attack, over 50 missiles on one airfield, it was a rap on the knuckles, but it didn't really do anything. This would be a rap on the knuckles unless we go for a much more coordinated attack, hitting some of the chemical sites, hitting the means of delivery, that's long-range artillery, fixed-wing aircraft, helicopters, etc. That is a major campaign. That would take 5, 6, 7 days. You would have to take down their integrated air defense systems. That means almost certainly coming into confrontation with the Russians. You'd have to be very careful there. So it's fraught with danger. So I imagine it will be a short, sharp thing. If it's going to be a short, sharp thing, okay, it shows people they mustn't ever use chemical weapons, and I think that's a good thing to show. It won't really make any difference there. If anything, it'll probably slightly lengthen the war. But I think, in international terms, it's probably the correct thing to do. And I certainly think we ought to be part of a coalition if a coalition believes that is the right thing to do, in the same way that a coalition has supported us in the business of the dreadful attack on our own territory by Putin's people on the ship Isles.
Well, that's the thing. There has been some quid pro quo there, hasn't there? But you talked about the risk of a Russian confrontation, and that's been the big issue, isn't it? One of the main reasons why the West hasn't got involved in recent years, as we've seen these horrific massacres and chemical attacks and the like on the Syrian people, is because of fear of getting into a confrontation with Russia. But isn't that crucially the problem? The message has gone out to Vladimir Putin that we are afraid of him and we're afraid to have a confrontation with him, and that's why he apparently is sees fit to send nerve agents onto British soil to kill a former Russian spy and also put the lives of British citizens at risk. Is it not the case that that we are going to have to at some point confront Russian military might?
I think it's absolutely right that we have to be robust, and we have to be robust in the right circumstances when it's on our side, as it has been, I think, in what's happened in Wiltshire. And I think that's taken Putin aback by how there's been an international response to that. But we have to be let's take in Syria, for example. We know very well the Iranians, as well as the Russians, are supporting Assad. Therefore, the Israelis are very anti the Assad forces. The Israelis have done a lot of attacks into Syria. The Israelis would be very happy seeing a large international attack on Assad. They'd be very happy in seeing regime change. That, I think, would make it an even longer civil war. It'd be even worse. We would again get enmeshed in the country. None of that would be good. There are no good guys in this. The people who are saying they were attacked by chemical weapons, a lot of those are worse than Daesh. There are no good guys. Assad is totally loathsome in what he's done to his people, but the opposition are totally loathsome, and civil wars are merciless and ghastly events, and if possible, it's best to keep out of them. We got involved to the extent that we are trying to take down Daesh, and we have definitely destroyed the caliphate. That's good, because their aim is anarchy and killing of people. But as far as the rest of Syria goes, we need this civil war to stop, and I'm afraid it probably will stop with Assad still being in power. We then need to use every means of diplomacy to try and help that poor, benighted country and its people to try and sort of rebuild itself and hopefully get some better sort of process in the future for governing it.
I think so many people listening to Talk Radio right now will agree with everything you've just said then. And you say, look, it is a civil war. And I can understand when you say it's best to keep out of them. We're probably not going to be able to halt that civil war, certainly at this stage. Maybe if we'd gone in much earlier, we might have been able to. And as you say, I don't think anyone expects any outcome other than Assad remaining in power. But when you say it's best to keep out of it, well, it's not for the Syrian people. And this thing I've never understood. I don't understand why we've got organisations like the United Nations if we're not going to help people who are being massacred by their own leaders. I don't understand why there isn't a moral demand on Western democracies to save people in those scenarios. When a lot of the people who say we shouldn't get involved are the same people who are saying we should take in hundreds of thousands of Syrian refugees, but there wouldn't be any Syrian refugees. In fact, there are millions of Syrian refugees in bordering countries if we had maybe acted earlier to stop this civil war.
I think if I'm going back to that vote, I think all we would have done on that occasion in 2013 would have been to be a rap on the knuckles. We weren't going to get enmeshed in it. We weren't going to, because actually to really get involved, you'd have to put ground forces in. You'd have to do what we did in Iraq and what we did in Afghanistan. And I don't think there's any appetite for that, and I'm not sure it's the right thing to do. I do think you're absolutely right. Internationally, we should show how abhorrent that sort of behaviour to your people is. But historically, if you look at it, it's very, very difficult when something's happening within a country with its own government as it's grown up over the years. And it's been impossible for the UN really to get involved.
Well, the UN has chosen not to get involved because Russia and China always veto these things. But that shows how pointless and what a waste of time the UN is, surely.
Well, I don't think the UN is pointless, but it certainly has real problems in certain areas of enforcing some rules. But on occasions one can do it. So, for example, I think when we did nothing in Rwanda, that was very bad, because I think there we had the powers and capabilities, the international community, to do something. So there are occasions.
But we learned the lessons of that and then didn't go into Kosovo of the UN either. I mean, this is the issue. But you think, just finally, as Lord Alan West, you believe diplomacy is the answer. And my guest, Jenny Jones, has just been saying that I'm not quite sure how we get to talking and how we get to diplomacy while people are blowing up children.
Well, that will be going on in the background. That will be going on in the back. And let's face it, the children being blown up are being blown up by the opposition in Syria as well. And they're putting children in the way of fighting. So let's, as I say, there are no good people in this. All of them are bad, and it's a merciless, ghastly civil war. If we prove unequivocally he used chemical weapons, and if there's an allied decision to do a rap over the knuckles, I believe we should be part of that. It needs to be done quickly. And then we need to get into the diplomatic areas. And I personally think that if that's going to be done very quickly, it's probably best if Theresa May doesn't take that to Parliament, because that will just add another layer of difficulty and thrown over the top of it. But I know I'm a lone voice, I think, in that.
Lord West, thank you very much for joining us.